Title: A poor girl alerts a millionaire. She put something in your cake. 2 hours later. Original YouTube story script asterisk the fork stopped less than an inch from his mouth. Music was still playing. Crystal glasses still glittered under chandeliers. The guests in tailored tuxedos and silk gowns were still smiling, the kind of smiles people wear when they expect nothing in the room to go wrong. And then a little girl's voice tore straight through all of it. "Don't eat that." Every head turned. She stood at the edge of the ballroom in a coat too thin for the season, shoes worn pale at the toes, hair slightly damp from the rain outside. She looked like she had been pushed around by the whole city before finding the courage to push back just once. Her chest heaved, her hands shook. And her eyes, those eyes were locked not on the cake, not on the crowd, but on the man holding the fork. On millionaire Daniel Mercer. "She put something in your cake," the girl said, pointing with a trembling finger. "The lady in red, I saw her." For one suspended second nobody moved. Not the violinist, not the waiters. Not even Daniel. Because something in the girl's voice didn't sound like panic. It sounded like truth arriving late, breathless, and terrified it might not be believed. And what happened in the next 2 hours would break a lie open so completely that half the people in that ballroom would never be able to look at themselves the same way again. If you still believe that truth can come from the smallest voice in the room, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and share this story with someone who still has faith that courage matters, even when it comes dressed in poverty and trembling hands. Daniel Mercer lowered the fork. He was 52 years old that night, one of the most recognizable businessmen in the city, a man whose face had appeared on magazine covers beside words like visionary, ruthless, disciplined, and untouchable. He had built an empire out of shipping software, logistics networks, and a mind that could see profit where others saw clutter. People called him self-made because they liked the clean sound of it. They didn't talk nearly as much about the years he'd spent hungry, or the father who left, or the mother who cleaned offices until arthritis bent her fingers inward like wilted petals. Daniel had spent a lifetime outrunning helplessness, and somewhere along the way he had also outrun softness. Not all of it, just enough that people no longer expected him to have any. His birthday gala was being held in the Grand Marlowe Hotel, the kind of place where the flowers were changed twice a day, and the marble floors reflected light like water. The cake in front of him stood 5 tiers high, ivory with delicate sugar roses climbing along the sides, commissioned by his fiancée, Celeste Voss. Celeste was standing 3 feet away when the girl shouted. She wore crimson silk and diamonds so cold they looked almost blue under the ballroom lights. She did not flinch like the others. She smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but Daniel saw it. Security reached the girl first. 2 men in black suits moved toward her from opposite sides of the ballroom, fast and practiced, already assuming what everyone else assumed, that she was either unstable, opportunistic, or about to beg for money in the most dramatic way possible. "She's just a street kid," one guest whispered. "Probably wants attention," said another. "How did she even get in here?" The girl took one step back, but she didn't run. "No," she cried, trying to point again. "Please, please listen to me. I saw her. She lifted the sugar flowers and poured something underneath. She used a white bottle." "I saw it." Celeste let out the lightest laugh, almost pitying. "This is absurd," she said. "Daniel, darling, have someone take care of this." But Daniel was still staring at the child. Because poor people lie differently when they lie for survival. He knew that. He knew the nervous speed, the half-built details, the eyes darting around for exits. He knew what desperation sounded like when it was inventing something. This girl was terrified, yes, but terror was not making her vague. It was making her precise. "Stop," Daniel said. His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. The music faltered into silence. Security froze with their hands inches from the girl's arms. Daniel set the fork down on his plate. "What's your name?" he asked her. The girl swallowed. "Rosa. How old are you, Rosa?" "12. And you're saying you saw someone put something in this cake?" "Yes, sir." "Who?" Rosa turned, arms shaking harder now, and pointed directly at Celeste. The room inhaled. Celeste's expression remained composed, but her jaw tightened just enough for Daniel to notice. Only just enough. "This is insane," she said. "Daniel, this child is obviously confused." Rosa shook her head frantically. "I'm not confused. You told the kitchen staff to leave. I was by the service door with the flower boxes. You took off one glove and used your napkin so your fingers wouldn't touch the frosting. You lifted the roses and poured it near the middle layer." Now several guests were no longer looking amused. Daniel turned slowly toward Celeste. She opened her hands in disbelief. "So now we're taking testimony from a child who sneaked in through the kitchen." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked at the cake, then at Rosa, then at his head of security. "Owen," he said, "seal the dessert table. Nobody touches the cake." Celeste laughed again, but there was a crack in it now. "Daniel, now." Owen moved without another word. A hush spread through the ballroom, uneasy and electric. Daniel took a step away from the table. "Take a sample to St. Vincent's toxicology lab. Personally, and another to my physician." "Understood." "And check the kitchen cameras, every corridor, every prep area, every service entrance." Celeste's face changed then, not dramatically. "Just enough. Enough." "Really?" she said, too softly. "You're going to humiliate me in front of all these people because a child in wet shoes made a scene?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "I'm going to verify the truth," he said. Rosa had not meant to be there at all. 3 hours earlier, she had been in the alley behind the Grand Marlowe carrying carnations in a bucket with a cracked handle. Rosa Alvarez lived on the south side of the city in a one-room apartment above a laundromat that rattled through the night like it was dreaming badly. The wallpaper peeled in curled strips. The window near the sink didn't close all the way. In winter, she rolled a towel against the gap to keep the wind from slipping in. In summer, the whole room smelled faintly of detergent, mildew, and old worry. She lived there with her mother, Elena. Once, Elena had been a pastry assistant at the Grand Marlowe. Not the kind with television fame or glossy cookbooks. She was the invisible kind, the one whose hands piped flowers no one remembered, whose shoulders carried flour sacks, whose feet swelled through double shifts, whose ideas were sometimes borrowed by chefs with better uniforms and louder names. Then she got sick. First it was exhaustion, then dizziness, then the fainting, then the diagnosis that came with too many syllables and too little mercy. Once Elena could no longer stand through a full shift, she was replaced. Quietly, efficiently, without anger and without compassion, which was somehow worse. After that, poverty did what it always does. It entered not like a storm, but like a leak, small at first, then everywhere. Rosa began selling flowers near intersections after school. On good days, office workers bought them to apologize to someone. On bad days, people stared through her as if childhood itself had become part of the city's background noise. But Rosa had inherited two things from her mother that poverty had not managed to steal: sharp eyes and a stubborn sense of dignity. Elena had taught her names of flowers, names of ingredients, names of lies. Poor people can survive being tired, her mother used to say while folding bakery boxes at their table to earn pennies. But we cannot afford to stop noticing. So Rosa noticed everything, which men dropped their wallets but not their pride, which women smiled at children only when others were watching, which delivery drivers sneaked leftover bread to the alley, which rich people thanked staff, and which rich people never learned their names. That evening, Mr. Salim, the florist who sometimes let Rosa help sweep his shop for bruised roses and loose change, had asked her to carry a last-minute order to the hotel kitchen, 2 cream and blush arrangements for the Mercer Gala. "You'll get $10 if you wait for the receipt," he told her. $10 meant milk, bus fare, and maybe enough left for half of her mother's prescription. So Rosa went. She entered through the service alley, past carts of folded linens and metal racks of chilled desserts. The kitchen was a world of steam, butter, sharp voices, and bright stainless steel. She stood quietly where the prep staff told her, hugging the flour boxes to her chest. That was when she saw Celeste, not from the front at first. Just a woman in red entering, where guests were not supposed to be. One of the pastry assistants said, "Ma'am, the cake is already set for the ballroom." Celeste smiled in a way that ended conversation instead of beginning it. "I know. I want to see it before it goes out." The assistant hesitated. "Of course." Then someone called for help in the freezer section. 2 kitchen workers hurried away. Another was sent upstairs. Within seconds, the prep area thinned. Rosa didn't think much of it until Celeste looked over both shoulders. Then she saw the bottle, small, white, no label. Celeste slipped one glove off with her teeth, used a linen napkin to lift a cluster of sugar roses, and tipped the bottle over the seam of the middle tier. Not much, just enough. Then she set the flowers back exactly where they had been, smoothed the icing, and slipped the bottle into her evening bag. Rosa had gone cold. Celeste turned at the sound of a tray clattering somewhere nearby. For one terrible second, Rosa thought she'd been seen. But Celeste swept out before the child could move, heels crisp against the tile. Rosa stood there paralyzed, flower boxes digging into her palms. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe medicine. Maybe decoration syrup. Maybe. But then she remembered something else. Celeste pausing by the doorway, speaking into her phone in a voice so low Rosa only caught a fragment. "After the toast. He won't know until it starts." That was all. It was enough. Rosa ran to the nearest staff member, a dishwasher named Tamaz, who knew her mother from years back. "Tamaz," she whispered, "the lady in red put something in Mr. Mercer's cake." At first he stared at her. Then he saw that she was not performing fear. She was carrying it. Tamaz looked toward the ballroom doors, then back at her. "If you tell the wrong person, they'll throw you out before anyone checks." "What do I do?" He wiped his hands on his apron, thinking fast. "Front entrance will delay you. Go through the linen hall, then the side curtains by the orchestra setup. Don't stop for anyone. If you're right, don't stop." That was one act of kindness. But it was not the only one that brought her there. There was Mrs. Burness, the crossing guard on Halston Avenue, who had once stopped Rosa after seeing a bruise on her wrist from where a shopkeeper accused her of stealing and grabbed too hard. "Listen to me," the old woman had said, crouching to eye level in her bright yellow rain cape. "When something is wrong, say it while your voice still belongs to you. Fear is fast. Use your mouth before fear uses your legs." There was Ms. Green at the free clinic, who treated Elena with more tenderness than the bills deserved, and once told Rosa, "You are not a burden because you are poor. Don't let this city train you into silence." There was Mr. Salim, who paid Rosa honestly even when he knew she had miscounted stems in his favor, because, as he told her, children learn what truth costs by watching adults pay it. And there was Elena herself, weak on the edge of their bed, teaching her daughter how to hold her spine straight when asking for fairness. Because bending too early invited the whole world to climb on. So when Rosa reached the ballroom and saw a man about to raise poisoned cake to his mouth, all those small pieces of borrowed courage arrived with her. Daniel had the gala quietly dissolved. Not ended, dissolved. That was the word people later used because the room never exploded. It unraveled. Guests began murmuring into their phones. Board members drifted into tight knots. A senator's wife asked for her coat. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else insisted there had to be a reasonable explanation. Celeste remained radiant. That was the unnerving part. She walked through suspicion as if through perfume. Daniel asked Rosa to sit in a smaller private lounge off the ballroom while Owen handled the samples and security footage. A server brought hot chocolate and a plate of rolls. Rosa stared at the food as if it might be taken away for looking at it too long. "Eat," Daniel said. She glanced up, uncertain. That wasn't a suggestion. She picked up half a roll and ate with quick, embarrassed bites. Daniel noticed she folded the napkin before setting it on her lap, the way hotel staff did. Not a child used to luxury, a child trained by someone who had served it. "Your mother worked here," he said. Rosa froze. "How did you know?" "The napkin." She looked down at it and then gave the smallest shrug. "She used to show me things." "What's her name?" "Elena Alvarez." The name stirred something in him. Faintly, not memory exactly, more like a sound behind a closed door. "Is she home now?" he asked. Rosa nodded. "She shouldn't be alone long." "Is she ill?" "Yes, sir." Daniel was quiet. He noticed bruised gray at the cuff of Rosa's coat, where the lining had given out. He noticed she kept glancing not toward the ballroom, but toward the old clock above the lounge entrance. Counting time, counting what her absence might cost at home. "Why didn't you just leave after you told someone in the kitchen?" he asked. "I tried, and they might not have believed me fast enough." Something in Daniel's throat tightened. Because that was the mathematics of poverty in one sentence. Truth delayed could still become tragedy. He sat across from her, no longer looking like the polished titan from magazine covers. Up close, the silver at his temples showed more clearly. So did the fatigue beneath the authority. 2 years earlier, his wife, Miriam, had died after a short illness that money had not been able to negotiate with. Since then, Daniel had become harder in public and emptier in private. People called it resilience. Most nights, it was just loneliness wearing a tailored suit. Celeste had entered his life 8 months after the funeral, efficient and elegant and impossible to surprise. She knew how to speak to investors, how to soften headlines, how to make Daniel's isolation look like power instead of grief. She had stepped so neatly into the architecture of his life that he mistook fluency for devotion. Now, sitting across from a 12-year-old with cheap shoes and fearless honesty, he felt something deeply unpleasant beginning to rise inside him. Shame, not because he had been fooled. Because a child had risked more to save his life than most adults in his orbit ever would. At the 1-hour mark, Owen returned. "No toxin confirmation yet," he said quietly. "But the kitchen footage shows Ms. Voss entering the prep area alone at 8:12 p.m. The angle isn't perfect. It doesn't clearly show what she does with her hands." Celeste, who had insisted on remaining nearby, folded her arms. "So there it is. Nothing." Owen continued as if she had not spoken. However, one of the service cameras in the loading corridor caught her discarding something in a linen cart on the way back. Daniel's eyes sharpened. "And we recovered the bottle." Celeste's face didn't change, but color drained from the skin at the base of her throat. "What's in it?" Daniel asked. "Still being tested." Celeste gave a breathless laugh. "This is grotesque. You're turning a child's fantasy into a criminal inquiry." Rosa spoke before anyone else could. "It wasn't fantasy." Celeste turned toward her with such controlled contempt that even Owen noticed. "You have no idea what you saw," she said. Rosa met her eyes. "I know what I heard too." Daniel looked at Rosa. "What did you hear?" Rosa swallowed. "She said after the toast, 'He won't know until it starts.'" Silence. Not the ballroom silence from before. This one had weight. Daniel stood. "Escort Ms. Voss to the East Lounge," he said to security. "She may call her attorney." Celeste stared at him. "Daniel, if you do this, there is no walking it back." He held her gaze. That's usually what truth does. When they led her away, she did not protest, and somehow that frightened him more. The second hour changed everything. At 11:14 p.m., the call came from toxicology. Owen answered first. then handed the phone to Daniel without a word. Daniel listened, his face emptied. When he finally lowered the receiver, even Rosa understood that the room had crossed into a different world. "Well?" Owen asked. Daniel looked at him. "It was laced," he said. No one moved. "With what?" Owen asked. "A concentrated cardiac agent, enough to trigger arrhythmia in someone with my medical history." Rosa didn't understand the full meaning of the words, but she understood death when it was translated into adult silence. Daniel had a known heart condition from years of stress and an old untreated infection in his 30s. Not public knowledge. Not widely disclosed. Celeste knew. His physician knew. 2 executive aides knew. And now the cake had contained a substance calibrated not just to harm, but to disguise harm as vulnerability. An accident. A tragic collapse after champagne and celebration. Natural enough for headlines. Convenient enough for inheritance. Owen swore under his breath and reached for his phone to contact the police. Daniel sat down slowly, as if the force of staying upright had suddenly become too great. Rosa watched him with wide eyes. "You would have died," he looked at her. For a second he seemed unable to speak to anyone except that child. "Yes," he said. Rosa lowered her gaze, and her shoulders trembled, not with pride, but with delayed fear. The kind that comes only after disaster has passed close enough for the skin to feel its wind. Daniel saw it, and did something nobody in that hotel had ever seen him do in public. He crossed the room, knelt down in front of her and said very softly, "You saved my life." Rosa's mouth parted, but no words came. Because children like Rosa were used to being blamed for emergencies, not thanked for preventing them. Then her eyes flew to the clock. "My mother." Daniel stood at once. "Owen, get the car." Rosa hesitated. "I have to go. You are not going home alone tonight. It's not far." That wasn't a question. 10 minutes later, Daniel Mercer sat in the back of his own car beside the girl who had kept him alive. The city had thinned into late-night rain and blurred neon. Rosa gave directions in a voice that kept trying not to sound ashamed. When the car stopped in front of the laundromat building, Daniel looked up at the rusted fire escape and the flickering sign downstairs. The driver opened his door, but Daniel was already stepping out. The hallway smelled of bleach, old cooking oil, and damp plaster. Rosa ran ahead, fumbling with the key. "Mom," she called as she pushed the door open. "Mom, I'm back." No answer. The apartment was dark except for the streetlight leaking through the broken blind. Elena was on the bed. One hand lay across her stomach. The other dangled off the side, fingertips pale. Rosa dropped to her knees. "Mom," Daniel moved instantly. "Call an ambulance." Owen was already on it. Elena's pulse was weak. Her skin was clammy. The room was too warm and too empty of medicine. On the table sat a prescription bottle with 3 pills left and an insulin pen nearly dry. Beside it lay bakery box templates, folded neatly, and an overdue utility notice. Rosa's voice shook. She said she was okay. She said if I sold enough flowers tomorrow, we could refill. "She's breathing," Daniel said firmly. "Stay with me." "She's breathing." The paramedic